Alright, 라고 가서 안치 된지 달라 안에 지게마 가브리엘이야 지체 송야디 안에 간지 송고라세네 당보 지단에 최셰리아 안에 최 송로지에 사디바 안 소와데 안 마도스네 쉬어 송고레서 마데바이나 안에 최 송로지에 세야 소와 마데바이나 안에 최시겨 말에세 언도스네 지단디레 쉬베 다 지단디네 야소 소는 쉬고레스 안에다 마소바이네 야 마소바이네 안 취시 소바이네 안 야취 송로지에스네 야 쉬바이네 인지미지 나는 시고레벨라네 안디앙 안 다시고레스 다시제제 편이 취시나 아니 폐게 잡려 뇌긴 용구에는 여베나 아니 야 시로시 라마 쉬바이나야 아니 취시교 말해지래.
Good morning. Last night we continued to look at the outline how to explain the Dharma. And there it was mentioned that a particular Dharma teaching needs to be requested with sincerity and with respect. Otherwise, if a supplication is not made, it's better not to give the teaching. Moreover, even when a teaching has been sincerely requested, it's not then that the teaching must necessarily be given. The teacher then still needs to investigate the students to come to ascertain whether they are suitable for that teaching or not, or whether that teaching is suitable for them or not.
야 최슈르체스나 마슈베나 소와 마데베나 안에 최시야요 마레베람나 안디안시호시야요레제레 가스는 소와 마데베이나양 매니 최시나 콜라 팬도지 연구요베나 너코 동아세나 디기주비알이야 콜리에 팬도 연구요베나 안 마슈시고레스 시고레스 코데기 메고 콜라 팬도 연구요베나 야 최시로체스나 마슈베이나양 마슈베나 마슈시고레스 가르스네 최시야디 최송아지 현지 동아세야다 디기 주변에 현례 판배치도 인자 아니야 아니 가시게 최 대바에다 되니 듬버여바이나 되니 쉬마도 봐 니 용고래 제자 되니에서 마 미기 미디 송로체스나 마슈바이네 콜레 판도 여바다 최신의 평균 여바다 판도 동아세야다 디기 주변에 팬도 연구여바이나 하거나 안 마시바시아나 지금 말이 마시 최시고래 콜시고래스 야 마슈바네 시고래스 그래.
And thirdly, whilst it has been said that one should not teach unless a teaching has been sincerely requested, that is the case in general. But further, if the students are known to the teacher, then a teaching can still be given even if it has not been requested, where the teacher sees that the teaching will be of benefit. Then, without being requested, they can give the teaching. And this is in line with the motivation that the teacher should have, which is one to bring benefits, a motivation of wanting to benefit their students. And that with such a motivation then, the teacher can give a teaching without it even having been requested.
아니 니교로 로봇 제가 써야지. 니 로봇 제가서 로봇 제가 있나? 안 파주 미디기 로봇 제로제 말아봐. 지 로봇 제가서 지랍네. 지진에 코로나에 그냥 가르치 로봇 제가 나한테 투구에서 교주 로봇 거야 말아. 나를 통신 당기도 선비기 삼번 얘기 용식이로 와. 되네자 제가 야 안에 로봇 제 말아봐나. 아주 로봇 제 디셔라 연구 말아봐. 제가 미지기다 로봇 제로 제 라바이나 콜로야 판도지 연구에는 지금 많이 봐도 판도지 연구에는 로봇 제고 그냥 아직 바 로봇 제조 콜로야 판도에서 강아지 체는 느낀 체 연구에는 로봇 제고 말해서 지루와 뒤로와 야 지나 뒤로와도 로봇 제로 제 남네 제고래 사는 이나다 제타들 판도 연구에는 제고래서 뇌비게 연구에는 제고 말해서 베디나지 디나신 때문에 강아지 체돼 봐 로봇 제로 제 남마도 왜네 콜레 로봇 제나고 안에 지디오 집에 하고 그이네 먼저 로봇 제고 그랬어 와도 꼭 강아 베네요 베네 최위 튕게다 되네도 강아 시고 체는 그 지게는 그 주지 개도고 미지 주의 마대로 누구에는 로봇 제로제 말아베나 소속이 소교회 로봇 제도는 로봇 제고 그랬어 그래서는 콜라 강아를 교회 등 안주기 통기 교토의 누버 여바 찍라야 마제바이나 다 디하고 말해. 진짜 제고래서 내가 저 지딘 나네 찍바로 와디로와. 진짜 지다나 야 로고체 말ab나 마르니 로고체 갈ab네 미게 삼론다네 미딜이야 삼마 가르코고데 ngal 통전 땅고도 ngal야 nga 교 슈리 따기도 ngal야 지스비 콜라야게 내가 요나 요시바로 와. 그래서 야 로고체로 마제라 말은 로바제에서 지다나체. 로고체 라바이네 제고르라는 베네 로고체세딜레 미질리아 쇠기 돈달라 니쇠 코프기 수기인을 로고체로질람나 네 책으로 봐. 진짜 이 로고체가 말해서 네바지요. 로고체로제 말아바이나야다 지게 강하다 지시우 주여바칭 통도 강하세 콜판도 요번 로고체고래서 엔베닝한 지딘베나 디로와 베디나신다 상기 최송야되나 현리에 패바다 신기 동아세에 된다 인자 안디나신 지바로 차고와다 저나로시.
This advice that's given in our text is actually very similar to how one usually lives in society as well. If you know someone who's involved in a task and they need support, they need help, and they'll ask you, you first check, can I do this? Do I have the skills? And if you do, you help them. They've asked your help. You know you have the skills to help, so you do so. But on the other hand, if you see someone's involved with a task and it looks like they could do with some help, you'll investigate first before offering. Because on one hand, you know that if you offer, the person may take your offer of support incorrectly and think you're looking down on them, seeing them as incapable. So in such a case, you need to have investigated beforehand, and then it's better just to stay quiet. But on the other hand, if you know the person, you know them well, and you know they'll be very appreciative to have someone skilled to helping them, then certainly with this motivation of wanting to help them, one should do so. And of course, in the process of investigation, one looks at what they are doing and thinks, yes, this is a beneficial activity, or no, this is a harmful activity. And then this also weighs in on one's decision. If, for example, they're doing something which takes life, which kills, then of course one declines even if one is requested. So what the approach that is presented in the text is very similar to the approach we take in our everyday life.
가상한데 되네셔. 다 되는 마 모두에 되네. 다 되는 마치들이야. 되니사 되니 담가 첨부로 낭디해서 되니 담가 첨부로 낭디 딜랑에바 마니징 로나 마줄베 최sabla 아니 제치바 지삼 시장 라듀도 바바 따르규네 최 되니 요모베 조소 조와 최마워 나모스.
Let's turn to the text. So in the published book, it's top of page 29. In the handout, it will be on page 33, perhaps? 33, the final paragraph of the chapter. There are clearly critically important, these are clearly critically important instructions. If you do not gain certainty about them, and your attitude does not change, as is often the case, then no matter how much profound and vast Dharma is explained to you, it will become a little like a god fallen to the rank of a demon, and that very Dharma will instead fuel your afflictions.
Dene Dhamma Chimbo Nangdi Sedim, the Ganglia Shegi, Chut, Ba, Chidan, Ma, Chusun, Kabla, and Kunoine, and Suschanle, Pembe, Samlot Tan, Chikukores, and Yingendilena, and Dunya Yutumba Yabata, Denishiko, and Mase. 아니 지게 야취 송로지에신 쉬시 아니 송고르마도 안 강 람사 소수기 신규영에 최셔 왔은 시교 말에 송야디 디지 공을 시야디 이 담가도 빼 마시 담가 첨보를 기에 첨부 쉬우래서 담가 첨보래서 담가데 기에 첨부 쉬우래서 게 담가 첨보 나도 빼 기에 첨부인 바디 이 낭대에서 기에 첨부를 해도 우스워다.
The first sentence, these are clearly critically important instructions, is referring to the outline on how to explain the Dharma. That in particular, the one explaining the Dharma should have a motivation of wanting to benefit. And therefore, they should have some hesitation before teaching, ensuring that their audience are receptive to what is to be taught. And this process involves ideally the student requesting, supplicating a particular teaching, and even if one is requested, investigating, thinking first whether this is most appropriate or not. So these and other advices given here are of great importance.
Dine zade dibe geshe morishas, yinbi gimzaden dilasa, ngeba manye jing lona ma yurwe sewa. Da dila ngeba manye jing lona ma yurwe sedu, dila ngeba manye ba sedu, chizan dine ki chwe ki chik di nyamlen jeba la dine jeba ina, ane dunga dine pong tugure gewa, dine ki chou sa tugure senpeke, da ngeba manye ba, dine ki chike samlong gyune mediga na chik. Ngeba manye balana odadi re sembi ha goya de che ngeba manye balan de ha mo che de ne ha mo ga sa lo na ma ju wa su lo di ge yu chola ya chue je ge de ni de ba da de ne ge yi chi me de ga na so da lo na ma ju wa je sa de ne ge chue ya yi che da an de ba da de ne me de gen de ne ge tablam de nyam ne je ba la de ne di ju ru ya dung se ge de ngeba manye ga sa che le ya确个这啥子也不被确的也不休息呗呢？其实没些讲，那判断用嘛的话说的呢，我判断用嘛的是些讲，那判断用嘛，其实没些讲判断用嘛的去的。嘛，去年色的，去年看的去了点半没吧？那电力给你们讲呢，那这个我说的东啊，这个这个这个就土个的身边内陆的哈毛个哇。ngeba manye ba deni gi ni lo ha mo go wa ta lo na ma yu wa le ne lo na yu wa ne chue le ya de ba yu ba da chue ji dwen yu du ba yu ba se ro da de la chue le dwen yu de ba me ba da dwen yu du ma me ba de lo ma yu chue le cho so se ma so wa deni gi lo ma yu ge yu ba na an de le ya chue sa bo ga ze xie ne an de peng ma le je chue sa mo chue sa la jie che wa sa ba da an jie che wa kan de xie be ne ji zhe me xie yang so peng ma le je le.
If you do not gain certainty about them, so the them here is referring to the teachings that one would receive. In particular, one could understand this in terms of if one doesn't gain certainty in terms of which minds or which ways of thinking are harmful and how to abandon them, and if one doesn't gain certainty about which minds are wholesome and how to cultivate them, then one won't have trust or faith in the teachings. And lacking trust or faith in the teachings, one is not going to be applying them to one's mind. And then as this continues, your attitude will not change. And then no matter how much profound and vast Dharma is explained to you. So one could be receiving many teachings of both a vast and profound type. But one is not listening with a deep interest. One is not listening with an aspiration to radically transform oneself, fulfill one's true potential. Lacking such a motivation, then one's mind is not going to change. One's attitude will not change.
La dudu baba targyurnes, la dudu babas. Dan anzuge, jidal ha sen anzuge. Ya rewa jaza la se de ya go ching an zo le ro chi hen ba che du se de an zo le ne be ji hen na ne gang an je hen so so che wa chi hen de le du se je da ji da ne an zo ji tin ba na du da an ji na la se ji din se gro wa je za la du du ba ba se de an zo be ji ko le ya jap jue ne ko le ya bu ji hen de le ji rewa ji be ya bu ji rewa jap de na de ne gi di gi la di gi an zo ya be ne ji never done Ganga, she driven, Hadi, Anzuli Pando, so never yen chasor, which is a la duty Baba Darsor. Dinigi, Dini Chavana, Digoma, she's a Dini's betty petty. Chu Dini, Yomo Drosso, Chizan Chu said, Nanzu Yomo, Meva said, Duma said, and did you do a Chu Chagor, Bada? 确些的短的确个短的地了哇，伊呢，的那个确了对吧？没吧？短语多么没吧？的那个按这个的那个按这个刚才开始了呀，确些吧呢，开始说呢，对了呀，按那过去的了，过去不下呀。大抵没关系，都写的，确的那要嘛的写的，的那个确了过的，人的那确的了，按这个跌落给啊，的那要嘛这边的那个什么单位结尾呢？真的给我牛毛不一个抓下说的，确实把得了的呢，可能过一个牛毛吧，给我地方嘛牛毛不也说的，实际上确实的牛毛不抓掐住过的是，实际上确定你牛毛不抓所抓啊，切毛啊，那我天天给忙不用都是。天天忙不用都这个，但这上天那个确些的确的来的，那就跌落街啊，那这个落大街，天天牛毛吧忙啊，那的确些干来看当，确了呀，过的，天天个那用过的，这上天天咱确些的嘛，是结果的给起么的，是我打断了。
This is presented with an analogy. It will become like a god fallen to the rank of a demon. Generally, the way one would relate to a god is that one would turn to them for help and assistance, whereas a demon would be someone, a being that would cause harm. So we could think about people we know, someone who's more of a friend to us, or someone who creates problems in our lives. So here, when we turn to a friend, for help and support. But in our interaction with them, we end up getting harmed. This is likened to either an analogy like a god fall into the rank of the demon, a demon, or where one turns to the Dharma teachings with the hope that these teachings will enable one to recognize our faults and abandon these faulty ways of thinking and cultivate wholesome, virtuous ways of thinking. But this doesn't happen. And the reason for it not happening is because of our attitude. Our mind is closed. We do not have an open, receptive attitude and a deep interest. But rather, one is just hearing the teachings but not applying them, not thinking about their meaning. And therefore, one does not receive much benefit. So here the teachings can be likened to a god or a friend. So they have the capacity to be of great benefit. But that is not the outcome. One sits there feeling that I've received many teachings, it's made no difference, my life is still difficult. And then one doesn't look within, one continues to look without. And now one, instead of blaming all those around you, now one blames the teachings. The teachings are no good. The teachings have brought no benefit to my life. So what happens here is that instead of something that has had the potential to be of great help to one, to be a real friend to one, here ends up just harming one, because what harms you is your response to it. And from this response, your afflictions grow, such as anger or pride, as well as wrong views, as well as negative karma.
那你说这个都是真的用古写的中国人，但我呢连把的话，当然这每年去学习的个大话看的书，可能给大话看的书嘛，还没话些，这个学习的，当然是修罗的，变得但南边的搞的开灵高了，现在告诉我的几点过把写的开灵高嘛的话。几天过不要嘛的，这三的写的，当然这个去他们这上新这边东北你的啥的呢？这三都没你去讲啥谢谢讲啥的，大话看的学没的，真的还没话现在呀，去不说个这个去把这些呢，几天过不写的要嘛的，真的的去他们这上新东啥的东北写的，没你写啥讲啥的，几天过不开灵讲啥去呢？真的马写的。个牛这些来个话，今天过不开灵开灵就了话，变得也需要的，开启要的，工作了今天过不要嘛的，刚这个就是工作的那些要嘛的，那工作啷个话，是吧的？今天过不要嘛的，现在的那个东北人的写白呢，那所以个被朋友的老师那么大头呢，过来朋友就写白呢，每年到我讲啥的。到我干的学没的还没呢，过几年过不开灵钱呢， Lamsa that midi ko tang do midi ya ko mendo se ada and ko che de zumare se lamsa ti che che shi be jin jin ko le ya nyomo bo mangu ji go ra de ko de che za nyomo be zhuo su zhuo mangu de ne yong guo le che za di sab sab che go le che ma xie da de la ya che za che pa lamsa ya che na ro che ma la ba na du che na so su ki pe la sang xin gu do da xie be ne de ne ge nyomo ba je ge Kolia dunga se dan digi duye sabla and nyomo ba je denigi diva sa chue nyanga chimbo yores chesan sabsab che ko gore sa ja du sen sung go wa na ning bo di re do.
What's described here can quite easily happen actually, because amongst an audience for teachings, people will come with various views and opinions. And the views of Buddhism do not always match with views that are deeply held in society. So, for example, in Buddhism, there's a rejection of the concept of a creator God. There is a rejection of there being a self, but rather selflessness is presented. So when someone who holds a deep view that there is a creator God and that things do exist by way of their own inherent self, when they hear a teaching where this is refuted, they could have a strong negative reaction and reject the teachings. And in this way, something that they could have found benefit in by being skillful and placing certain things aside but taking other parts of the teachings that are useful, instead of doing that, their afflictions arise and they just push the teachings aside completely. So there is a real possibility of this happening in varying ways depending on one's own views, and therefore one needs to be aware of that and be careful.
That in the Chidana, we need to see me name, Benemi, and Chantunga Chanko, you can cheer in that. Delia Chantungyo Mara Champe, Duja, negative shaven, Coco Chimida, the drawing do it. The Jaza, Dine Zada, Kolia said that Mangutu your thirst, Tuna said, and Cheveneco Dust, Lura Baba Yunguru, Jaza, Dine the Shehara, you could many Yungur, but didn't denegate that, Jaza that, Kanjela Chu Sunya, the Shengi, Nyomo Magia, Nyomo Gia, Gaya. Nyomo Bakia Kaya, Nyomo Maya, and Dunga, Digi Dubege, Tablam Dine, Jine Sungu Winza, that Chus one the Chia in there, Megi Sunse Shesa delegate la, Cole Pandora, Meva, Nyomo Gigubana, the Nigi, and Jigma Sungyo Mares, and Colia Pando Yobachi Dante, Nyomo Bakaya Digi Pando Yobana, Ma Sungu, such a nine body that, Dordune did that.
So, for example, if the teacher is presenting the faults of drinking alcohol, someone who enjoys a drink is going to quite possibly have a strong reaction to that and get quite upset because they're really enjoying having a drink. And they, therefore, may well end up rejecting all the teachings rather than just saying, oh, I don't agree with that, so I put it aside, but these other things I can find some benefit from. They may just end up, their afflictions arising, and rejecting what otherwise could have been of benefit to them. So in a case such as that, one may well find a teacher will say, well, if you really enjoy your drinks that much, well, maybe just a little bit, just a bit of the taste, then that could be okay. And in this way, try to prevent the student from having a strong negative reaction. Because the skill that is required from a teacher, and just to say as a translator, in this section where I'm using this word teacher, it's not the Tibetan word. It would be more like expounder, but that's not so nice. It's not referring to, like we have in the next chapter, that of a Lama or a guru. It's just the normal usage of someone explaining the Dharma, so, which is as the text says, but it's not like a big teacher. Anyway, back to Geshe's commentary. So here the skill of the teacher the skill of the teacher is that they need to present the teaching in a way that will benefit the student. So it's something that will be of use and they can apply in their life. And at the same time, the teacher needs to present it in a way that limits the possibility of afflictions arising in the mind of the variety of students before them. Because when afflictions arise, beings suffer. And that is not the goal of the teacher. The goal of the teacher is to benefit beings. So if they are presenting something in a way that leads to the arisal of afflictions, then that is contrary to what they are trying to achieve.
Dewe na tenje gyumchen tenje zada dewe na da ce jigne chuna jonghe bar she serwa tar yimbe nyemba da sheba lamdo tongsul dila lodan demba namki bene cheba da nyemba jungre ki madhare dang demba jete damgo timbi ngonjo cho ni sin di mi chrosa.
The text continues. They say if you must calculate the first of the month, you will err until the 15th. And thus the wise strive to transform their listening and explaining into the path. Accordingly, whenever you have the opportunity to hear or to teach, you must do so in the proper way, for this is the best preliminary for teaching the instructions.
Ce jingye chuna ce jongye bar she zewada sin bebege dambe shire ce jigli pa norson chu sona den ce jongwa ba chu rure saji chu se dambe shire da bena na jruwa jangga jibena jangga dangbo di mano jig jidan mano khorwa da jidan ni da je jigri lamne den jongwa ba de le jongwa jangga ju juru cha sarwa deji ni da je yang jig ma da je jig lamna jig da ni re lamna 당보 지어도 되는 마제 종아라면도 주시마도 요말 상거 말아 진짜 종아봐도 따다 차거 말아 진짜 지길 세지길 너 주나 아니 너도 차나 세 종아봐도 너도 용그래 세대 지난 베베게 담배로 지되네래 진짜 아주 장갈 집에는 장가 직다도 갑을 봐 니다샤제 직시에는 종아세 지도 타마 종아지도 가제요를 주루샤도라 주 따다 책 종아 따다 차거 말아 디나지 당보 지도 갑을你大对个不经贸的没话些，你是这边呢，中华来的，整个这参考中华大大要么就是嘛都要嘛，就是当波的了出所呢，中华把都出过来才是端那的时候的话，都别着的话。
So here, a Tibetan idiom has been presented. If you miscalculate the first of the month, you'll err until the 15th. So the meaning is that if, let's say, you're having to count a number of things, if at the beginning of the calculation you make an error in your calculation, that error will continue throughout the entire calculation.
Dandala garasungorasene jezanga jugi che nyamba inada che shebe inada dangbo kunlo de yakut kore se ora kunlo shik pene che shegen ji mene ma shebe kalya pemba da 제외 삼바 거의 동아시아에 된 디기르에 콜레 펜베 삼로 혼에 셰고레스 군론디 고고레스 다 당보 군론 혼을야 안 소소랑 군론디 최시 미 거지 직시에서 코절야 직 변조 라투바 지당 코절의 직직 라야기 직직인 셈비 고고할 직 따야데 되는 최시 고고할 따제 코절의 변조 라야 직인 사다 미코 최시는 고고하다 정아랑 코들 뺏겨라 침뭐 수긴 군론 랑이 랑이기 아니 지게 가소레 천년다 용야 랑일야 닝구라야기 돈달라 군노 데니 삼탄의 최셔베나 군노 디요마 당보크로나 디고 마레스 진짜 디네시디 아니 마 최셔디기 팬이기 잡라 뇌기 용구레스 진짜 가스는 뇨모버게 기로로와데 뇨모지 뇌 용구레스 진짜 최셔행기 권에 당보 군노들이야 안 소수기 개판 삼마다와지 콩을야 팬바당 그 동화세다 팬베 삼노제와 콜레 제외 삼바다 젠베 삼도 군에 랑체 군노 당보 최마신녀를 군노 디케오르마도 소수 콜레 최생이 담년다 요양 아랑의 연구 년다 요다 연구 요야 군노디 디케겨 말드네 군노 케베는 당보는 코로 노고래 세다 돈다지 숨고래 최세겐을 마지 세대
The meaning of this idiom, if you miscalculate the first of the month, you will err until the 15th, is that in our context here, for the one either giving the teaching or receiving the teaching, the motivation is essential. So to look at the motivation then of the one giving a teaching, They need to cultivate a motivation at the outset, which is wanting to benefit, a wish to benefit those they're going to interact with and help guide them to eliminate suffering and to eradicate from their motivation any trace of a wish to receive something in return, such as gaining a good reputation or prestige or material reward. Rather, they should cultivate at the outset a motivation of wanting to benefit and maintain that motivation throughout their teaching.
Za sosu kunlo diniki tam nyanda yonda sosole nyinguru yonge kunlo diniki keje ma chöshe baina ya sosolya shege chöshi gorde di genjinga sosolya nyomo perugorwa chiste 차다 소설이야 차다 배르고 자고 배르고와 어두시네 담메니 고호 따야려 되네 최세데 다다 마셔바제 한 지게 주인시에게 냥아요로와다 메나직 소수가 똑바 메나 여도 제 마신와다 신유도 되네게 메나 여도 와서 많이 고호 당고고로와다 되네 시에게 냥아요로와 되네 여도 한 소설이야 한지 주인시에 고호 따바이나 소설이야 묘모 두숨이야 뭐 공부들 주고로와 지난 뒤 당번에 뒤 삼당요 말해서 세줄로 추나스다 되는 바도 집에는 저가제 유니버시티에서나 너직 소수의 묘모를 숙체를 셔처와 차고를 디기 아니 미니텔에 판도지 용도고 말어 되네자 세직을 너나 종업을 노그레서야디 당번에 군원된 계속바이나 아니 야고용 말해서 디 군원된 기교 말해서 다는 군원 간에서 키워고래서는 야 펜바다 제외 삼바 랑동의 삼로 유니마다 코로나리아 대기 주변의 동아시아 판도랑 삼단지效果를 해지 그거는 되네시 고고래서
And further benefit of generating this motivation prior to teaching and keeping it present in one's mind is that this is a motivation of a deep caring for their students. And with such a motivation of the welfare, the benefit of their students being forefront in their mind, this will help the teacher guard their own mind from the arisal and the dominance of afflictions. Because when one is teaching, there is a real danger of pride arising. And where pride is so dangerous when teaching is that wanting to seem superior, wanting to live up to this, what you are projecting onto yourself, you may end up pretending to know something that you don't. And this then will lead to you deceiving others. And this is not the purpose of teaching the Dharma. The purpose of teaching the Dharma is not to strengthen afflictions, it's not to take advantage of others. So therefore, at the outset, a motivation based on a deep caring for students needs to be generated.
다 님바다 다 님비기 냥이 요네 꿀렁 야고스고 그래서 당번에 꿀렁 야고스 맞죠 봐나 되네 야고용 말해서 다 당번에 배는 냥이 요네야 직소수기 꿀렁들이야 그 간의 시기에 이게 되는지 그 되네 간의 시기가 최대치야 콜이야 직 견제제에게 삼로 따져 그제 녀야 직제 용구로와 안디 멤베 안디야 직바로와 냥이 요네나 소소에 땀년다 요야 소수기 안지 튕겨 야고 차에 don달라 냐 용구로와다 게 디녀제 안지 어다 디젤이야 어게 디전의 최대의 수준에 바인다 게 장바인다 세다 캡라단 소속에 깨다 차에 don다 디 don달라는 지게 두신의 담년라다 인고라게 가서래 되는게 삼다지 군노 되는지 캐다 지게 삼다지 년바이나 디 군노 다다 차가 말해서 되는지 년바이나 안진마 안지게 소수기 가서래 녀모바 마충도 줘야라 팽기 말에 녀모 숙체르고 그래서 녀모바 충도야 팽기 말에 제가 녀모바 숙체르고 녀모 숙체르고 바이나 소설이야 강아 마리리 디기 용 말에서 제가 당보 그런 군노되는 삼타교 말에서 다는 군노 간에시 연구를 당보는 연구급이야 다 나랑 의기 누가 녀모바데 마음이 매버서요 우도 다데 매버서야디 달라마 디제네 최년제 남에기 안지 tablamdi ma tingore sembeke delia icheda je an denigi ma nyen su ma nyen je ngedi nyamlen je marang nyomo ba se tu ba ji sebeke samno an je dushine samda je ne nyen go gore je.
In the same way that this idiom, if you miscalculate the first of the month, you will err until the end of the month, refers to the motivation of the one giving the teaching, so too does it refer to the motivation of the listener. The student needs to, before engaging in the teaching, cultivate a virtuous motivation, just like the teacher needs to. Because further, if the student does not cultivate a suitable motivation beforehand, then the teaching session will not be nearly as beneficial as it otherwise could be. Because it's through the cultivation of an appropriate motivation that the mind will be open and receptive and engaged, and in particular curious. Because the motivation that the student needs to cultivate needs to be free from any wish for fame or reputation or later material gain through this acquisition of knowledge or being praised for being knowledgeable. Rather, the motivation should be one of, I need to hear this teaching because it is about my own mind. And through the information that I receive here will help me achieve my goal of liberation or enlightenment. So the purpose of the purpose or the motivation one is cultivating will be, I need to eliminate my afflictions. So this teaching is relevant to me because it is about how I can recognize and eliminate my afflictions. Moreover, I need to cultivate wholesome virtuous qualities. So this teaching is relevant to me because I also need to strengthen my wholesome virtuous qualities. So therefore, one develops an interest in the topic and develops that interest in relation to one developing oneself in order that one can become a better person, fulfill one's potential, and be of greater benefit in this world. That is the kind of motivation that the student should cultivate before the teaching, rather than any kind of self-interest of wanting a great reputation. Oh, I've had teachings on these topics, I can answer all these questions. Because that kind of attitude just ends up enabling the afflictions to grow. And that is not the purpose of teachings.
nyana ta kunwa dine kina tiga omare saji sungurwa chiza dine yi yon sibarwa penenga jige sosuge samdada ngade jige sosuge tamnyanda soyada tangi mohba da jikshanliya jikshiyechine jibe jige ngana nyingora ko raagi dondalya te penenga gyawmistala shushuguesa de dine ki shushe aninga jema mohba da ngi gyawmistala jube dine jangwa singuesa xiangguwa datuya de gasne Lama di kera chenpo yin zang, an di zi xu re la du, an mi yi xie yung kore sam je, teni ke sam dang je, an jige xu yi xie, kunlong kuhar dang ya dang, dam nyan da yuwa, nying kuru so so ki, nying kuru raya ki, sam la teni dang je xue xu na, an kunlong di no wa res, di tigo ma res, jik kunlong di ya no wa res. 다 최시행 용원에 이나야 소소 담냐다 용하다 인고 용하게 된다 아니지 딜이야 대시에는 이 담냐다 차 인고 용하게 군노디네 삼다지 최신하지 요 말해지 세상 최시행 다 내가 니 용원에 너 군노들이야 아니 그래서 인고 용하야 담냐다 용하야 안시행고가 다야기 되니기 군노 삼다교 말해 되네 삼다베는 니가라 판도 용 말해 녀모바에 슉셔셔 줘야마도 녀모버 충주고 말 최시에기 최시에바다 년비고 된다디 가르랍나 소수기 녀모바 충을 다야 동화세야 디기주비아들이스 군노 되네치 년바 있나 안에 녀모바 슉셔 주고래 안에 디기 용하게 잡로 동화도 슉셔 주고래 디지고 말해 세상 최년바다 시베 니가블라 니가기 군노디 키교 말해 삼디 땅교 말해서 당번에 두시 땅교 말해서 돈은 임보디리다.
So for the recipients of the teachings, the student, they need to be very clear with their motivation that there is no trace of afflictions, of wanting to perhaps gain a greater reputation from receiving teachings, especially in the sense of being able to brag to their friends that I've received this teaching and that teaching from His Holiness, now this teaching and that teaching from another famous Lama, and so forth. This is inappropriate. This is not the purpose of the Dharma. So for both the teacher and the recipients of the teaching, they need to look closely at their mind and ensure that their motivation is as pure as possible, as free of afflictions as possible. The motivation for both the teacher and the student is one of wanting to eliminate the afflicted minds and to cultivate virtuous qualities so as to be of ever more benefit in our world.
Lodan Demba Naye Bebe Bene, so Chisa Sheb Nyemba, the Che Nyeda, Chepa Shebala, Lamdo Donso Sidu, Di Tuyata, Dunga Sege, Tablam Joya, and Beba Bezuche would say. The Bezuche, the Carson Yangi, Wene, Karasang, some Tangrasena, and Ya Jingarangi, that Dunga said, and Digi Tuyagi, Dunga de Se Gudu, that Dunga de Kanga said, Anzgula, Yomo, but the Digi said, Yomo, but the Se Gumeba, so Dini Zang Elements and the Church, Ya, and Nyamlen, Jiahuchia, Sambegi, Dinigi, Yomo, said, and some of the Nista, and did an enemy Lama. Cheda, Lama, Ishi Chene, Chen Yang Isibi, that Gunwati, that Gunwa Yagachuna, Delamazer, Rangi, Dunga said, Shen Semja Tamji, Dunga said, Yomo said, and he said, Seva Chigi, Dizangi, Chen Yang Sempigi, Gune, Nyanji, Yamen, Yahuchigi, Sembi, Guno, Denis Keche, Nyangores. Lamdo to Denicheban, Lamdo to Hores, Yabu to Hores. Tama Chishi when in Mashi, Kue Dunga, call it Pembaji, Juna, Sempigi, call it Digi to the Dunga, Se Yomo, shoot Chong, call it Pembaji or show some biggest Chiapo sometime, do Shebena, Denigi, Denigi, then Yamba, Denigi Shia, Bezuche Hores, Donso Dilla, Loda, Debana, Bene, Denigi, Shebena, and Pazula Pingire. Socially, Pingora, Shan, Pingor, Rasinigala, Pando Jungurdi, Jumde de Lea, and Yakuchungri.
The sentence continues, and thus the wise strive to transform their listening and explaining into the path. To start then with the one receiving the teaching. So they should be sitting there with a motivation of wanting to hear these teachings so as to come to an ever deeper understanding of their own mind and to cultivate ever greater skills at being able to transform their mind. So in other words, to take the teaching and to cultivate it within themselves to strengthen the arisal of a path. So in this way, they receive the teaching to cultivate it into a mental path. So this comes through having a motivation of wanting to eradicate their afflictions and strengthen their virtuous qualities so that they can spiritually develop and be of ever greater benefit to others, through developing themselves to be able to help others attain lasting happiness. So this is the motivation of the student, and with this motivation they receive teachings so as to spiritually develop in order to eventually give more to others. The teacher, the one giving the teaching, they will have a motivation that follows on from the motivation that they would have had as a student. So they would have had the motivation just described as a student. Now as a teacher, they expressing what they have cultivated within them and sharing that with others, giving others the opportunity and the skillful guidance in how to cultivate paths within them. So the teacher also has a motivation of wanting to help others, in particular, help others to eradicate their afflictions, minds such as anger and pride, and cultivate good qualities, minds such as love, compassion, and wisdom. And both of them, the recipient and the expounder of the teaching, they both make great efforts in their endeavors to transform themselves and thereby to help others.
Ini cheba da nyemba jungre ki matha re dan denbar jadi side. Chesan cheba da nyemba jungre ki matha re da denbar jadi side. Chesan chue shebi kabe nada, chue shegen yungone samdawe nada, chue nyenge gone samdawe ne. Karosa matha re tama dinigi charjik chue she da charjik nyembi ki dinigi gidi na nyembi da nyemba da chue shebi kabla chue shegen yungone ane pambe samlo. Pembe sembe kunnoche. Che nyenge ngone na rangi dunga se dan digi tubiage andi jedo ane yimbe kunno sambata digi shuba na je samba denishi tangure se denige sam kunno denishi taji tangure se cheba da nyemba junrie ki ane matha re da de matha le thama denige samno ri gure se je da temper jade se undu chini che nyemba da sheba che gure se den sada damga tuyambiku ngondru choni ndi imbi chiro sidi chesada lamigi ma damga ma chik dunga se digi chube tablam ma lamdun chegi ngondru ya kunlo di nige samlo yakwa tangwa di kiye chimbo shiwure di yakure eso yaksho di es choni di imbi chiro.
The text continues. Accordingly, whenever you have the opportunity to hear or to teach, you must do so in the proper way. Here, Lama Tsongkhapa is saying to us that every opportunity that you have to receive a teaching or to give a teaching, it matters. Value it. Ensure you have the appropriate motivation. Don't take it for granted. Don't just engage in the teaching event from either side with a motivation that is lacking. Every opportunity has value. Every teaching opportunity presents one with the opportunity to further strengthen wholesome minds and eradicate unwholesome minds. Therefore, always generate the appropriate motivation. And the text continues, for this is the best preliminary for teaching the instructions. The final sentence emphasizes that the best preliminary before either giving a teaching or receiving a teaching is to cultivate one's motivation. This is indispensable before receiving or giving a teaching, to cultivate a suitable motivation.
Chue shege ngone kunlo chia da samlo tangha denis tanggo gure asa da chue nyenge ngone samlo tangha denis tanggo re se de chang anju ge samlo juo tangha ko ne ki shi ge sa samlo de ya nyingu da tamnya da yo sam di ta kyo mar di samlo ta di nganzu le di tu tu ma res de ne ka de ne ge de di yo se be ne pul ya ka nga di ge se sa kunlo di ki go ma res samlo ta di kyo ma res di samlo di nganzu ge chue nyam ba da shi gen yung ne na samlo di ta kyo ma res samlo no tu res chue nyang ge ne sam da di samlo ta kyo ma di samlo no tu res da di samlo de ba me ba so ko re che ore da da na samlo de ga re ya ga i ga dang ko re la na da nganzu ge kisin di nye le shu ba na jin ji ge ma so ne ba ro sam da du and never the never need the say woods and be samlota and in the say suicide to say men big serious remember the Yichiada. Mengi Tesha, the men is have a net the targets and be Yishi. Didn't mean the part Mudine, which Bejas are the Kuntikura, didn't she them? Chisa training when some down a carosine, thinking because of Dushi Duktim Bekwane, on Dushine, some down Yangure said. 다 최시행군이 최마신이 군론 가르고서는 튕긴 두시 죽대네 안 최시군 군론들이 긴도 고래스 제산 현리에 편바다 제외 삼바 선비기 되네 기시고래스 제산 디니 현리에 편바다 제외 삼바디 먼저 디기 먼저 디 라신이가래 디기 주도 디 삼로디 먼저 뭐 공부했다 고래스 제산다 최년행군에 있네 군론 약부체다 되네게 케어다 최시행원에 약보셔거든 다디게 심보래서 그지 간지 된다라 그녀의 시행은 저기 최년행원에 군로 튕긴 두시 쭉 가서 뇌균 숨바 튕긴 두시 쭉 삼로 딘딘다는 최년고래서 최시행원에는 군로 튕긴 두시 쭉 파삼 다제 되는 시행고래서 니 당아주 최시비게다 년비게 원조당 군로를 삼다래 되는 시고고래 되는 삼로 다투베는 안지 야게 조투고래서 그러다
So as we're near the end of the preliminary teachings, the introductory teachings to the text itself, here, to summarize what we're looking at here, is the need to cultivate and sustain a suitable motivation. And here I'll refer back to what we looked at the near the beginning of this particular chapter, which was on the 6 perceptions. And there it was mentioned for the listener that it's indispensable that they see themselves as being like a patient, that they recognize that within themselves there's something not quite right, that they need to identify what their illness is and then take the appropriate medication. So in other words, the receiver of the teachings needs to have an attitude of, this is about me. It's not a mere intellectual exercise. I'm going to hear this teaching because it's appropriate to my life. So that was the first perception, seeing oneself as a patient. The second was recognizing that the teacher is like the doctor, the one who is talking to you about your illness. And thirdly, that the instructions, the teachings themselves, are like the medicine. That the Dharma teachings themselves need to be taken, which is the 4th instruction, that the persistent practice is the cure. So here one has the determination to hear the teachings because they are relevant to me and to apply them to my own mind, because this is how I will attain lasting happiness. So that is the motivation that a receiver of teachings, a student, should have in every instance where they are encountering the teachings, whether in an oral form or in a book. And we also saw thereafter, at the beginning of the section on the one presenting the teachings, that they should have a similar perception. They perceive themselves as being like a doctor, the one who is dispensing the life-saving medicine to their patient. So both these 6 perceptions relate to both the listener and the propounder of the teachings. And these come down to the cultivation of an appropriate motivation. A motivation to recognize or to come to know ourselves well, to eradicate any trace of afflictions in our motivation to receive or give teachings, such as good reputation, and to ensure that we are engaging in the teachings with a wish to spiritually develop ourselves, to develop our virtuous qualities, so that we can give ever more good into this world.
아니 연재는 아주 원도디 냠내 원도디 봐줘 사වර와다 가스네 당보코라네야 아니 최게 지게 최게 최리야 냠는 제발이야 아니 이시용하게 된다 아니 제법이 최게 개최의 연된디디네시 아니 디제라 담가 호롱게 채와 담가 채와 연된 최디게 연 개최된디디네 요래서지 마슈 되네에는 최디 퇴비게 퇴고야 돼 개침보리에서 퇴비게 판연 되네게 직 퇴고야 개침보리에서 바슈 나 되네게 나 집에 갈래 퇴비게 아니 퇴나 간에서 저거래서도 최 년비값이다 년행원에 삼로 다디셔바는 군원데니시네 고고래서 최 시행원에야 아니 군원데니시 고고래서 다취 지게 최 년시시다 데스투션 고고래서 원러시바래 나 되는마 다 냠는 제 곰자에게 냠는 원이 무엇이 드림바데 다 되는마 주야래
Now this brings us to a conclusion of the preliminaries to the main body of practice, the main body of the text. So the chapters we've looked at thus far were all preliminary. The first was looking at the greatness of the author, and there it was the reference to the author or the founder of the Lamrim tradition, the great Atisha. Thereafter, having looked at the greatness of the author, we looked at the greatness of the teachings, of the spiritual instructions. And thereafter, we looked at the benefits of listening, of hearing, or of studying the teachings. And now in this most recent chapter, we've looked at firstly how to listen, and thereafter how to teach. So this then concludes the preliminary to the main body of the text. And now, from the next chapter, we start with the main topics that one needs to cultivate within.
난 냠는 제기 림바르스 마소나 남보 난 지게 안델야 개위신 전수사 공야다 디네 기부 중요해 라미 투모에 라미 림바 공다 디네 기부 진다 투모에 라미 림바 공다 디네 기부 첨보 첨비게 라미 림바 공다 사지 어림바 시로시 레우르바 엔데네 림바 시제 데네 마 담마들 디티시그로와 상아도지 테베 라미 냠네 림바 사지 무르바 디네 자다 당봉하지 데리야 다디게 기회 신인기 대주기 냠랭이 림바 검나지 다디 마 쉬어야 된 마슈고다.
What lies before us now is first coming to a presentation on relying on the spiritual teacher, the very root of the path. Thereafter, the paths are presented in accordance with the capacity in accordance with the varying capacities of students. So first the training shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, thereafter the trainings of a practitioner of intermediate capacity, and then the trainings that are unique to a practitioner of supreme capacity. So those various trainings follow the initial teaching on a spiritual teacher. And after those trainings, the final section will be on secret mantra. So now we come to the next chapter on relying on a teacher.
직팔랍 신바지 고고로와 랍마 신바서 랍나 랍캔디 야게줘야 샤요 말와 류제로시나다 아니 지게 참르시 참 탑겐로시네다 안디 멤빙아 지게 넘기 롭종 이 랍캔 베네 지게 로 터름랍 센디도다 데니신 코로 센디 랍캔 게인데 야고시 고고로와 야고시 메나 센디 게인 고라 야고 마신 베네 니 랍야디 야고 랍투고마 야고 랍마도나 랍캔디 야게줘야 말와 디네 상한주 지딘 베나나 고 내가 가르이네 베네 제다의 기행 참 랍캔 기행 류제 랍캔 기행 이글 랍캔 기행 땅은서 제모로 지 다다마로 요르바데 디네 길 랍캔 기행디 코롱기 강 라베기 지 롭첸디 기행디게 야고 신바시 고고를 마데 기행디 야고 마신 베네 메니 로마 야고 롭투고 마라 로마도 벤자 로마도 로마 야게줘야 말아 제가 디네 가리네 기행디 빼 야고 고야다 기행디 야고 고야디 계치 못 최고로 와 어디나시 아 저기 동아세야는 디기도 깨와치말 하다 미고 방 토야기 탑람 땡게이나 기행디 디네기 된 투가 호 신바지 고고를 야고치 고고래 디나신 탈비고 방을 치겐기 기행디는 기행디 야고치 고 제가 디네에서 기부 충우다 람이진바 데마치티 데네기부 딩기 람이진바라티 데네기부 쳔베 람이진바 바롭촌시다 바롭든 지히니 기행디 야고치 고고래스 제가 기행 야고 고원자 기행들이야 천일을 마선 캐셔를 마선 데네든 고고래서데 다 기행이 캐셔디 데네 고고래서데 데네마다 디고 슈고래
In society, a teacher or a coach is of great importance in really any field where one wants to become skilled, where one wants to go beyond just one's natural limited ability. So if you can play a sport and you want to become good at that sport, you need a coach. If you can move your body so you can sort of dance, but you want to become a good dancer, you need a dance instructor. Likewise, if you want to work in a particular field, you need to study that field, and therefore you need to go to college or university to study in a particular field, and thereby be able to graduate and then work in that field. So this is how our society is structured, and it's the same with the case of our spiritual development. And just like in society, there are many people who have some knowledge of a topic and therefore can teach it. But amongst these many people who can teach, there'll be a wide gradient of knowledge and skill. Not every coach is the same, not every instructor has equal skill, not every teacher has equal knowledge and skill. And there's a clear relationship of interdependence between the skill that a student can develop and the skill that their teacher or coach or instructor has. The more skilled a teacher is, so both in terms of knowledge and skill in guiding their student, the greater the possibility of the student fulfilling their potential. So that not only do we know from society that a teacher is indispensable so that we can develop ourselves in a particular area, but the skill of that teacher will have a great impact on how much the student is possibly can develop. So therefore, our text will start in this chapter on relying on a teacher. We'll start by looking at what are the qualities to look for in a teacher so that one can identify where on the gradient of teachers of varying capacities, where how skilled one's teacher is, or what the qualities the teacher needs. Because especially in our context here of spiritual development, we are trying to develop and transform our mind in a way that we have yet, through lifetimes, been unable to do. We want to develop our mind to fulfill its potential in a way we have yet to do. So we need a teacher who is knowledgeable and skilled, who can show us how to train our mind with the introductory level of trainings, the initial level, and how to, on that basis, to engage in the trainings on the intermediate level, and then independent on these two bases, to engage or develop the trainings that are associated with the greatest capacity. So we need a teacher who's both knowledgeable and skilled. So the text will start by identifying those qualities within the teacher. So now you have a new handout. On the text in the published book, it's page 31. So looking at the top, the stages by which a student should be guided through the actual instructions. This has 2 points: the manner of relying on a spiritual teacher, the route of the path, and the stages of training the mind once you have relied on a teacher.
Zawa so the Karil was in the Kiwi singing the Latin Ligor, which is a lamb Zawas, Zawas, on the Shindol Mason Zawas, my kiss at Zawa like Rua, Chisanda, Nazuki, Lam Yamni Rimba, Lam Gulake, Sulitin was Nambo, Kiwi singing the Latin and Nazuki, Lobsang Dorje, Kiwo and Za, Lam Zawa, Chisanda singing Timbi Su, City, Lam Zawa, singing Kiwi singing the Kichimbo, Lam Zawa, D, Dena, Ganeka, Tingo, City. Samlu tone, Samlo canis Kiore, Ya Lama Timbi Kabla, Samlo canis Kiore, and Lunga Gitone, and Lama Timbi Kabla, Lunga Joba canis Kiore, said, Di Golia, Shuares or Lamia Zawa, Shin Timbi Su said.
So the relying on a teacher is said to be the very root of the path, which means that it's through the very root from which the mental paths will grow within us is the spiritual teacher. So I'll say that again because our text doesn't quite get it right. The very root from which the spiritual paths will grow within us is our teacher, and therefore relying on a teacher is of supreme importance. So this chapter then will present how one should rely on the teacher, primarily in terms of our mental way of relying, our way of thinking, as well as our physical behavior and verbal speech.
Lamgi Yamling Rimba Chasan Zawa the Kiwi Shin de Tugore said, Dingore di Madena, Lamgi Yamling Rimba de Shing Mares Roda. The Dembaru, Penang, 제모르시네 강제볼 제모제시네 야네 gen지기 람네 난주기 제모디 제산 신고로와 말라바이네 제가 미제가 야보 제겐질 파 따지네 아니 델레 따지는 난주기 제 신고로마도 데니게 당보하는 제모제겐디 유네 마통와질 디마다발라 현실에 마템방 난주기네 제신 말와 안지 지금 난주기 제모이나다 롭종아래나 이르브 쉐베나 당보 지겐지기 gen지기 랍제 난주기 출랍 안 되는 신발에 이것이 개인된 말아봐야 콜랍타로 파 따지는 아주 따지는 아니 되는 신야죠와 제가 되는 현실에 맞댄바 아니 이게 신야요 말와 디나신 아주기 삼로 땅탕 곰 접사 림바디 당보 기위 신 될 디게 랍제 되는 되네 신마도 신마도 원자 제가 람이 자와리是的 신 다 자와디 기위 신이 제자디 기위 신이 된하려야 류기 때 그래서 삼배 된다다 근데 죄외 된다 근데 삼배 된다 삼로 군노게 하지로와 죄외 된다세 되지 류가게 죄비게 죄외 된다더니 되네 가르쳐 오래선 되네 제오래서 되다 디시다들 람이 자와 신이 되면 추이세 디송고로다 대디기에 침보를 지고라 당한 저기 롭종 가리네两个 가리네 현실에 뛰네 용고에서 현재 장사디 제 계침보 주차로 대전의 신고원자 디나시르와다
So it really is the case that relying on a spiritual it really is the case that a spiritual teacher is the very root from which all good qualities within us will grow. All good qualities within us will grow into mental paths. The spiritual teacher is the very root from which all the stages of the path will grow in our minds. And this really is the case. And to understand this clearly, we just think of how things work in society. If one wants to play a particular sport, one's success at that is entirely dependent on the skills of having a teacher, the skill of a teacher. If one doesn't have a teacher, at the very outset, one will not know the rules of the game. One will also not be able to develop one's skills beyond a very basic level. And thirdly, one will not come to understand good strategies to apply in that particular sport or game. And similarly, in an area of ordinary knowledge, if we want to become knowledgeable in a particular topic, we need someone to guide us, someone to teach us. And if that person is not very knowledgeable or skilled in imparting that knowledge, then our development in that topic will be quite limited. But if on the other hand the teacher is very knowledgeable and skilled, we will flourish in that topic. So therefore we can see just from society that anything we want to develop in ourselves is dependent on relying on those who are knowledgeable and skilled. And so too in our area of spiritual development. So therefore our text will present how to rely in terms of both thought, so our mental approach, as well as our behavior, our physical and verbal behavior.
안디네 로지다제베 림바 제자다 기회 신인의 된찬에 되는 소소라야 기회 신인이 곰야 곰자데 로곰 지금 로 장야데 아니 간에 장고래선 되는 장고래서데 마송야 되라데 되네 로지다제베 림바 송고로.
So we're still looking at the first paragraph at the top of the page. So we've discussed then the first outline, which is this chapter, the manner of relying on a spiritual teacher, the root of the path. And thereafter, after this chapter, we will then come to the various stages of training the mind once you have relied on a teacher.
다 당보라 니스를 당보들이야 남이자와 신진주들의 니체 니가르스네 내가 기비 칠 중지에 죄대 셰바 안 종술 돌뒤대 땜바 사실.
So of these 2 points, the first one has also 2 divisions. So that's the next paragraph. The manner of relying on a spiritual teacher, the root of the path, has 2 points. The somewhat elaborate explanation for generating certainty and the condensed presentation of how to practice.
내가 기비 치르세다 라마 텔리아 안에지 이체당 대바 유행하게 된다라 아니 바 준수 죄대 샤바스 되스 바 키슈다 딘딘딘 바 되스 제바로지 죄대선 되스 개발하지 시기에서 배 개발시 우치 매바 준수 죄바세 배 돌뒤에 멤버체 되스 개발지 시우 개발 멤버체 된 준수 죄대 샤바스 되스 개발지 시기에서 되스 망 시기에서 Never give it cheers, never soon never give what is Lamadilla. Just Lamadilla never give to the Lamigi Kishu, the Yundin, the Dinichi quarter said, Pat Durs to give us she can sort.
This chapter, relying on a spiritual teacher, the root of the path, has these two primary subdivisions. So they both present how to generate certainty in relying on the teacher. The first part is a somewhat elaborate explanation, and the second part is a condensed presentation of how to practice. So the first part is not a particularly elaborate, but only sort of elaborate explanation. And then the second part is a brief presentation on how to practice relying on a teacher.
다 경수 레드다 소수기 로미 원에 야 라마야 삼당당하죠 삼당다리 늘듯이 시인세로다 경수 센티스로와.
The first part, the somewhat elaborate explanation for generating certainty. So this is where one generates certainty in what qualities the teacher should have. And the second part, the condensed presentation of how to practice. This is about a condensed presentation of how a student who now relies on a teacher, how they should think about or relate to their teacher.
먼저 가상 슈바 난신리 근데 체릭 라프라기인 지 토럼 라프라기가 제발라 코로나 케슈 되는데 고래 라켈 마서는 건데 니마 토럼 라다 되는 로디네 장교다 라케 되는 케슈 되는 고그래서야다 디멘비게다 롭지 샹다 체베나 간실레 강의 롭생 가기기 롭종 그 기힌 제베나 디기 코롱기 템비기 니마 장비기 코롱기 직되는질 장와야 되는게 라케 되는 집에 코롱 케슈 거를 와다 디니지 아주 낭비 취유고다 직되는게 롭된 제인들에 코롱기에다 케슈를 마소네 디니지 구글 해야지 어두스 바 숭인서 주준세 주된 예바기에 지스베네 체닐라브르게는 고 토럼라프라 디니시 템바레 코라라케 디니시 열랍도 장안디게 오다고 야고어로 그 빼고선 델레 이실리로와 데zel레 라브르게 야고 요세델레 로마 마알리고로와 장한 마알리고로와 근데 예인델레 토럼라다 디니지마 자야 말에 라케 디니시 요 말을 랍나 아니 계주 되면 델레야 장한도 뉴아 제거래 그래서 그 야볼랍 두고 말고 야보신 거 말씀 이실리고 말아와 제사 디니자다 람게 림바 제위신 람 냠리게 림바 템베 갑려야 디위 신인들야 땡네 이체다 제자 장도게 된예게 듬바게 와라 되네 디기 키슈디게 신고야 차고서 디 키슈디게 되는 시인세도 김자로 디르도와.
This first section, the manner of the somewhat elaborate explanation for generating certainty. So here one's generating certainty in regards to the qualities or the qualifications that a spiritual teacher should have. So in society, this too is important. So if you imagine that you're going to go study a course at university, and you turn up for your lecture, and there's just someone in front giving the teaching. You have no particular understanding of who this person is. You're going to be hearing that teaching, hearing that lecture in a particular way. But if, on the other hand, before coming, the university had printed their biography, and you'd read about all the qualifications they have and all the esteemed institutes that they had graduated from, and perhaps texts, their publications they have published and so forth, one will come to that lecture with a very different attitude, with more enthusiasm and be more receptive. So, independence on recognizing the qualities of the teacher, that teaching will have more of an impact on oneself. So this is the case in our everyday life, and it certainly is the case in the context of spiritual development. For a student to trust and rely on a teacher, they need to trust that their teacher has particular qualities, and thereby, due to their trust in their teacher, they'll be open and receptive to the teachings, and it's the teachings that they receive and they cultivate within themselves that is what leads to the attainment of mental paths.
Lamrim yula yunde naji kyawa tang, gyun naji tiba yanche, dele tamji ye zawa, dembi xinyi yinbe, tomaran di dinzu gache wos.
So now moving on, so we've seen that in the rest of the text has been divided into two outlines, and the outline we are on is the manner of relying on a spiritual teacher, the root of the path. And this has two outlines, the first being where we come now, the somewhat elaborate explanation for generating certainty. As all goodness, starting from the development of a single excellent quality and the decrease of a single fault in the mind stream of the disciple, has its root in the sublime friend, it is important to explain the way to rely on him or her at the outset.
Deji Shevana Lamrim yula yunde naji kyawa de, ta yunden chik kyawa de lam nyamling riba yunden mangmu kya de givishin tingo wa yin bar yunden chik nyamling riba na yunden naga chik kyawa ya givishin le tenne kiwa Lamrim yula yunden naji kyawa. Ta gyungi naji se gyungi naga gyun chasang meba soyala da givishin le tenba yin bar ma gyun naga chik pa 매바 디바스데 매바 차발아야 디 아니 기위신이 띵고레스 진짜 디네자 델레 탐지에 자와디 담베 기위신이 시드당 안주게 삼로 규화다제 삼로 규화다네 삼루기 기위 초 삼로데 야슈처 다야다 징아주기 뭐가에 녀몽 베지 삼로데 파슈 매바 소야리아 델레 탐지기 디네게 자와디 다 담비 기비신 신이레스 자와레 기비신의 자와레 되어레스 기비신 띵고레 되네 인자 당보가서 기비신 띵에베 맞아 기체무시오레스 디 토마레 디 띵추디 기비신 띵바데 기체무레 띵추디야 야부 직띵추 야부 띵고바디 기체무시오레스 오레.
This first paragraph presents why, at the outset of the main body of the text, the importance of relying on the teacher and how to rely on the teacher is presented. And the reason is because independence on relying on one's spiritual teacher, all good qualities will arise, whether one or many come about in dependence on relying on a teacher. Likewise, the eradication of faulty ways of thinking, harmful ways of thinking, the eradication or the decrease of a single harmful way of thinking or a multitude, all comes about in dependence on relying on a teacher. So therefore, because of the importance of this interdependent relationship, right at the outset of the main body of the text, it's presented why one needs to rely and how to do so.
Dini da delma dini ki kiechimbo san digo shele da desan masajan ma son trukche dela truk sede tenja ki wishin chenyi sede 당한 저기 기회 신인 된자게 기회 신인 될이야 연된 생이가 나치 고구려에서는 디 생이 연된 마선 된듯이 고구려에서 기술 된듯이 고구려에서 제 직체 된자 기회 신인 생이 된제 로메 생에서다 람냠니를 림발라 기회 신인 된제 롭전 제행 로마들이야 기술 마선다 된듯이 고구려에서 기술 된듯이 고구려에서 기술셔야 될라 된자 로메 생이서 단디 지대된 비수 시대다 대된저 로마디기 기위신인데 대난 간나까지 땡고를 해서 땡땡땡 땡고를 해서 대야지 땡주셔야 돼 직체야 다는 기위신인 땡비게 판연 가려운 것은 제 판연 디볼 마소나 땡땡땡 판연 요래서 셔야 판연셔야 직체야 다는 기위신인 마틴 바이나 용 가르요라스네 예미 가르요라스네 교연 가르용거라스네 교연 데네트네 롱그리에서 시야지 직시야 아니 자상게 대두셔베기 돈다 닝보드 소 돈다 뒤네 시야 직시 어두시네 대산마소는 누굴 봐 예와 진송도와.
So this topic, the elaborate, the somewhat elaborate explanation for generating certainty, we see has 6 topics. The first, which starts over the page, is the characteristics of the teacher, the one who is relied upon. So these are the characteristics of the teacher. The second, that follows the characteristics of the teacher, is the characteristics of the student, the one who is training their mind. Thereafter, the way to rely. So this is the way, the manner in which, through thought and behavior, the student relies on the teacher. And fourth is the benefits of reliance, and fifth, the faults of not relying or not relying correctly. And lastly, there is a summary of these 5 points.
람냠리 림바 삼로 주와다네 뇽모 바야단 디유주비게 탑란이 림바디 달롭센 디샤고와 롭센 디시에 경기 기엔질라 키슈되는 시고구레 롭센 디 장야기 장한들이야 키슈 로마들의 키슈되는 시고구레 장두유 갑라 데네데네 장고를 에사지 디숭고로와다 딩안주게 롭센다 대지 장시디 지게 디마도 된다라 난주 지 롭선지다 지바라와 근데 체릭 잡아라 천지기 변의 멤버로시나 멤버기 안직 럽칸 기행들이야 키슈된데 시고 그래야지. 데니 키슈 참면은 그 멤버기 기행하고 샤도 말해서 기스 키슈 참고 그래서. 다 멤버 장행기 로마나라야 키슈된데 시고 그래. 데니 상화지고 그러면 데니 마사나 그 멤버 장투고 말해. 제사디 장투가라 키슈된데 시고 그래서 키슈지. 다다 멤버기 랍디고블이야 양 장나들에 가는 장고 되는 장고르마도 되네 마잔 dig 말해서 비 장나 지어디 지금 롭종 지단게 지딘비 롭종 제다다 또 된다라 그 지바로 저다로 지바 차기도 와.
These 6 points here are something that applies really not just to our spiritual world, but to society in general. Because these are presented here as in order to come to understand and, more importantly, cultivate the stages of training the mind in order to eliminate faults and develop all good qualities, one has to rely on a teacher. And not just any teacher, but a qualified teacher. And to be able to rely on a qualified teacher, you yourself as a student needs to have certain qualities. And then there are benefits of doing so and faults of not doing so. All of this is required in order for you to fulfill your aspiration, and which is to transform your mind, to radically transform your mind through eliminating faults and developing good qualities. So this is a process that's applied in society as well. So let's say if someone wants to study medicine, they will go to university and they'll need a teacher. But not just anyone standing in front of them, they need a qualified teacher. And the students will have the wish to seek out a teacher as qualified as possible. But from the perspective of the teacher or the university, the students that they admit also need certain qualities, certain characteristics. If the students do not meet the entry criteria, they are not going to benefit from that class. Moreover, there will be a discussion about what are the benefits of gaining this particular education and what would you potentially miss out in terms of perhaps your life goals if you do not get this education. So there we see that these topics that are covered in this chapter are not something unique to our spiritual development, but they actually are applied in society as well.
어디나시 당한 저기 지sol이야 롭종으로 가르쳐배네 제비 편연 가르쳐서 나서 롭종 가르쳐배는 제네 롭종신의 신용으로 와 신바이나 디 롭종디기 베제 따져 소소 레가리나 가리나 라체와 레가 라체와이나 소수기 아니 지기 튕겐디 두야라 강아세 레라용을 편연디용으로 와 롭종 가야 마신바이나 레가 되게 라카로 와 레가 라카와이나다 Nimi dirwada, Lobsang Maje big Mishanda Lobsang so Lobsang Maje Devena, and Mahobana Lobsang Jane Dimi, and the Lakeda, the Yende Yakoshine, and the Payan Carriers and the Shingodu, Payan Delia, and the Jebu Carriers and Lagara Chewa, and Tunkin the Yaya Truptuya, Ganga Setuya Ngurua. The Lobsang Jidi Kablo, Jibi, Gobi, the Soso Lobsang Majeba Guni, Jimajeba Jedebene, Gyuen Carriers in Yabasam, Gyuen Carriers, Jema Lobsang Shingoma, Lobsang Mashedu, then the Lega Rakabu. Then Lega Rakabane, and the Tunkin Rakaba Ditone, Ganga Mangu Yungura, Chesa, Betinashin, Chesa Betinashin, Givi Shin, Denche, Sosuke, Yahusin, Tursam, Jeba Ina, and Payan Caros digging Yamnaji Rimba de Shin, Yamle Rimba Chishin, Sosu Yamne Jedu, Sosuke Dunga Seada, Digi to be a Sosole Digi, and it Yahuyon to Yaji, the Keba, Jevoti Muresia. Chesa Madin be Yemis, Jenige Samotana, Yamni Rimba de Majava Ina. Majaba the Shingmares, Mashin Zada, Dunga said, and Digi to Blagi, Dunga Sosugi, Dunga said, the Set two Mare, Dingy Devadi to 2 Mares, Dig Yemi Saji, Dimbe Payan, and Madimbe Yemi said, Donaning Boros, this Murwada.
One is thinking about studying a particular university course or going to study in any particular field, whether university or not. One will go through a thought process of what will be the benefits in me gaining this education and what will be the faults of me not gaining this education. And in terms of the benefits, one will think, I'll be able to work in a field that I'm drawn to, that I find meaningful or that I take pleasure in. And by gaining this education and working in this field, I will gain pleasure and I'll earn a salary that makes my life happy, that enables me to live a comfortable life, and I'll be doing so by working in an area that I find meaning in. So those would be the benefits. And the faults of not gaining that education is that this area of work that appeals to me so, I would not be able to work in that. It will only ever be an unrealized dream. And I'll have to still work and earn a salary, but it's not going to be as pleasurable as if I become skilled and knowledgeable in this area. So there one looks at the faults and the benefits of the faults of not gaining a particular education and the benefits of gaining it. So too here in this context, the benefits of relying on a spiritual teacher is that not only will one become educated, but one will be guided in how to integrate one's knowledge into one's very way of thinking. And thereby, one will overcome problems and difficulties, be able to deal with life's challenges so much more skillfully, and progress towards attaining lasting happiness. Whereas if one does not rely on a teacher, one will struggle to gather knowledge, and one will not be able to transform one's mind. And thereby, one will just continue, as we have from life to life, experiencing pain, problems, and difficulties.
다리네 당보티다 기위 신이 챙이들라 키주도 시고로와 당보니 지르 손럽 공제단 제반에 태바수수기 원도 제비기 망보시 송경 dir 기부숨기 람라 림기 티네 상예기 람 태바침보라 티비기 기위 신이 식된바 이노스.
Now looking at the first outline, the characteristics of the one to be relied on, the virtuous friend. Generally speaking, a lot is said about the topic in terms of the individual vehicles in the scriptures and their commentaries, but presented here will be the virtuous friend who guides students on the path to Buddhahood, the Mahayana, by gradually guiding them on the path of the 3 types of persons.
지당 손럽 나라야 안에 도당 도요 공절 나라 가르손 지르 손럽당 공절다 제반에서도 도체 손럽선 상이 손비 도체 공절에서도 디 공절 나 손시비 제가 제시비 디나르와 가르손 거라서네 gewe shin delia rig mangbu sung go re je taba so so won do je be ki mangbo shi sung yo re je ji san nian du gi tabe gewe shin ran ya tabe gewe shin ani taba chen be cha ju sen be ge gewe shin sa da an di men be ge da du shin ji san so ge Dinane nada jiganda chera bawa do dia bada semza bala so bada uma ba se yorba so so ran ge gewi shin dine gewi shin ri mangbo du sin taba so so on do ji be ge gewi shin mangbo sung yo re je re
As it says here in the scriptures and the commentaries, or the sutras and the commentaries to the Buddhist teachings, the commentaries to the sutras, a lot has been said about the importance of a spiritual teacher. And this has been presented in different contexts. Sometimes spiritual teachers are divided, or their importance is presented in the context of the individual vehicle, such as those of the hero lineage or practitioners of the solitary realizer lineage, and at other times, such as here, in the context of the Mahayana lineage. At other times, the importance of a spiritual teacher is presented in terms of philosophical view. So the need for a spiritual teacher to develop a view of the Vaibhashika or the Sautrantika or the Chittamatrans or the Madhyamakas.
다 되네기 게 망부 열에서인데 저와 되네 열와다 병안도 지소나래 게 망부 열와 가시기 안에 제모야 볼랍싱게 이베다 가시기 리모라 마싱 말와 리모 견제 두 말에 가시기 리모야 볼 견제나 이글라비알라 견제 두 말에 네 되네기 다시 리모라야지 제모나 제모다 말긴가 용거와 다행하지 이글랍 관시네 앙질랍 관시 센질랍 관시 안지기 이기랑 랍 관시 숨다랍 관시 다주랍 관시 되네기 이리카가 용거와 미라 요요바와 나서 나가요 디나신 망고요래서 그러와 다양 지행 가셔야 가려서는 센질랍 신겐나 앙질랍 신겐 다주랍 신 차상랍 신겐 망불랍 롭sen 망불랍 신겐 야 요요로와다 지사 되네게다 지행 릭 망고요로와다 지소나래야 엔디나시 낭비 최기네 델로든 지행게들 가지미 지게 년뒤에 남기림비게 냠냠ling 림바티 파야 볼랍싱베 싱해죠 나 랑기에 남기림베 냠는 랍싱해 차바 쳔비에 남기림베 랍싱해 데 숨과 랍싱해 숨게 냠는 랍싱해 되네 요소로 와다 가시기 년뒤에 지부 랍싱해 랑게다 자유심베 남기림베 랍로죠 제마투게 가시 랑게게 남기르 제자 차바 쳔비에 남기림베 로마투게 지나 가시에다 디니 숨거기 냠내리 발랍 투게 디니게다 기 지당다 망부송요 그래서 디니 망부여 봐 디니 나소여여 버와다
Just like in society, there are those who are skilled language teachers, but that's their area of expertise. If you went to them to ask to be trained in art or in a particular sport, they couldn't help you. Similarly, there are teachers, though, who can teach language and a sport and art. So they have a multiple of skills. So too in our Buddhist world, there are those teachers who are skilled and qualified and skilled in a particular area. They can teach one of the 4 philosophical tenets, or they can teach one of the 3 vehicles. And then there are others who can teach more than one, or perhaps all 3 vehicles, or all 4 philosophical tenets. So there are, again, in the Buddhist world, there are also teachers, some who are qualified in one area, and other teachers who are qualified in multiple areas.
디르스레 다디 디가 소시에된 디링 다딩 안주 다디 기회신 데니시 고레스야디 디가 소시에데 가르스네 기우숨 열람이림바 티네에서 당보 기우 중요 람이림비 롭종체 담미 강사 지르와 당보 미지리아 고 기우 중요 람이림바 파 롭종체 데니게 롭종도 기우 중요 람이림바 롭종체에서는 고 오스 차야데 데니마 기우 딩기 림비 람이림바 롭종체 다 데니마데 기우 딩기 람이림바 롭종 야고 차야데 안 데레야 타바 쳔비기 람이림바디 파 롭종 야고제 데네기 제행 계획신인 뒤서 다디 값을 해야 돼. 계획신 연된 해야 돼. 계획신 차상의 거시고 말에 가르치고서는 기부 중요의 남기린 바라 발랍 데네 마제네 데네 기부 딩게 남기린 바들 로정체 데네 안에 간사직 di lapsana dene kibu chimbe lam yirimba lobshon dene ki kibu chungwe da lam yirimba jingye lam yirimba kibu changye chimbe lam yirimba sumga lap tukengi lobshon je to lam yi tituen kibi shin di ko yende shigre so di kibu sumge lam la chine sangye ge lam theba chembo la tibe kiwi shin yin shi tön ba yino jina dadi ka so kiwi shin chengi dene shi kogure se shedi 기부 중요한 남이름바 정의 남이름바 타바 쳔베기 남이름바 차상 된 투경이 기회신이기 연된 말라켈 마소나 시인 마소나 데네시여 가지고 고그레 사지 돼야이 디시기 위해서래 맞아 개인 차상기 연된 디시기요 말해지래
Continues in the first paragraph but presented here. So we're talking about the context of this text. But presented here will be the virtuous friend who guides students on the path to Buddhahood, the Mahayana. In this context, the paths of training to enter, the stages of training that lead to one cultivating and entering into the paths of the Mahayana, this is what's going to be focused on in this text, and therefore a teacher who is qualified to teach someone, to guide someone so as to cultivate the minds of the Mahayana within themselves, those minds which lead to the attainment of Buddhahood. That is what is going to be presented in this text. And how will students be guided to enter into the Mahayana and achieve Buddhahood? By gradually guiding them on the path of the three types of persons. So first, the teacher that is required for a text such as this will present the teachings as presented here, first by guiding the students in how to cultivate the trainings that are shared with the practitioner of initial capacity. And with that foundation cultivated within them, the teacher will guide the students to cultivate the trainings shared with the practitioner of intermediate capacity. And based on these two foundations, the teacher will then guide the students in how to cultivate the paths of the Mahayana, the paths for students of greatest capacity. So this is, a teacher who is qualified to teach in this way is what is going to be described here.
다 기회신 지간줄에 갈라고르스는 삼노타타 디 삼타의 노트리에 디 삼타교만 되네 삼타는 간줄 동아 용거리 강아지기리스 다디 도쇼 삼나 데니스타바나 디 삼타는 간줄 샤산나 디기 두그레 아니 강아세 두그레 에세지 송고르와 베나랑 아주 베선지 샤베나 당아주 나주 류가 유숨기권의 샬리아 베네 셈기톤의 샬리아 네비 삼바당 세외 삼바기 디 노트리에스 이주권의 삼로의 샬라 체외 삼바도 네베 삼바 제바이나 디 노트리에스 디게 랑라의 강아지게 샬라 강아지게스 디 삼로의 땅교 말에 노트리에 직체 다 삼로 되는 주변에 다 류기 나게 류가 군주에 가려운 것은 류유권의 샬라 체외 삼바 체와 제바도 네번 류가 권의 샬라 네바다 지 체와 제바는 자와디 데네 라신이가 강아지 디치기요 말해서 자 간절히 군로들이야 안지 잔례 뇌바다 체외 삼바 다기요 말해 데네 제나 야고요 말해 다 류가기 쮸바디게 샬리야 체와도 뇌비게 자와체나 이 야고요 말해서 디 먹어야 돼 디레서 디자 먹어야 돼 방고 그랬어 다디 방 가네스 방고래 라비 다 삼바 가르탄 거디 마야게 된다라 다 삼바 가르탄 거래 라비오데 샬리아 류가 이스뮤거네 샬리아 니베 자와 싸우기는 지금에 세베 삼로 땅고레스 델레 손웨 삼바 수르미사 차로 제가 류가 이스뮤거네 샬라 녀바 지금에 삼베 삼로 주여바나 디기 삼로 디여바나 삼로 디기 류가게 쮸바 샬라 체외 녀바 쮸바 용마레스 제가 삼로 디기 샬라 아주 류가게 쮸바 요야디 군노라라레데 군노 디기 슈긴진의 류가 쮸바 리고레스 제가 군노라 샬라 녀바자 체외 삼바치 레오나 군노디기 슈긴진의 류가게 쮸바데 샬라 체와도 녀바 리고레스 제가 삼로 나리아 샬라 녀바자 싸우기는 지금에 셈베 삼로 쮸바이나 디기 류가게 쮸바디 샬라 체와도 녀바도 용어 말레스 제가 당한 좀 냠는 제고야디 안주 삼로 먹어야 돼. 시알이야 녀바 치외 삼로도 먹어야 돼. 디 매바 수요 오래. 디 매바 수요라 삼로 가르당 거라서 시알이야 녀바 지금에 선배 삼로디 야 공고래. 디 공제 야나야도 공제 누버 숙처 따베네. 아니 님이지리야 시알이야 녀바 지금에 녀바 지가 삼로 균에 자오기는 마긴 차로 그래서. 제가 디네인자 디네기 제바나 라시알이 니가래 펜바 용고래서 삼로 땅당에 돈에 제가 디니기 삼로 땅을 디니 땅의 류하기 아니 샬레 차와도 용 말해야 돼. 단 냠린 림바 삼 땅타 디스 땅 거래야 돼. 디 땅바나 라시니까래 펜바 용 그래야 돼. 데 랍자직 디티고로 와당하죠.
A spiritual teacher or a virtuous friend in the context of Buddhism, what they will guide the students in is to come to recognize within themselves which ways of thinking are unwholesome. In other words, which ways of thinking are harmful and which ways of thinking are beneficial, are wholesome. And the teacher won't only guide their students into recognizing which ways of thinking are wholesome and which ways are unwholesome, but will guide the student then in having recognized this, how to cultivate wholesome ways of thinking and eradicate unwholesome ways of thinking. So for example, a teacher will encourage a student to recognize the faults of ways of thinking that are directed towards others that are harmful. For example, minds of aggression, or minds of attachment, where one wants to take advantage of others, use others. So the teacher will identify these and explain how this way of thinking harms oneself. And when this way of thinking is expressed, it harms others. So that is the first part, is to identify harmful ways or unwholesome ways of thinking. Then, following from this, the teacher will present how to eradicate these harmful ways of thinking, how to gain freedom from this way of thinking that brings harm to others when expressed, and even when not expressed brings harm to oneself. And here, a teacher will guide the students in cultivating a mind such as ethical restraint, where one develops the determination, I will not harm others. I will not harm others through my physical behavior. I will not harm others through my verbal interaction. And I will take care of my own mind and ensure my mind is not even harmful towards others. And the teacher then will present the benefits that will come from developing this within oneself, the benefits that will come to oneself as well as to others. And then the students seeing these benefits will be receptive then to the guidance in how to develop such an ethical outlook, how to live an ethical life. So this training then is first one recognizes how having minds such as aggression or wanting to deceive others, how this harms oneself as well as others, and how through actually cultivating firstly the determination that in all circumstances I will guard my mind, and when these kinds of minds arise, I will not follow them. And moreover, I will rather generate an ethical mind, a mind which is a commitment not to bring harm. One then cultivates this again and again in meditation. So the teacher will present this information and how to cultivate these minds within oneself. Then it's for the students to both in the teaching while they're hearing this, to think about it, and then afterwards to meditate on this again and again, repeatedly over a sustained period. And by doing so repeatedly over a sustained period, these teachings will have a transformative impact on the student's mind, whereby when minds of either aggression or wanting to take advantage of others arises, immediately a repulsion to this way of thinking will arise, because the student knows that this is harmful, and rather they will generate minds of wanting to be in harmony with others, wanting to work in cooperation with others. And in this way, slowly the student's mind starts to transform their mind becomes more restrained and peaceful. They become happier, and they have a more beneficial impact on others around them. So this then is one kind of teaching, one form of advice that can be given. So thank you. Then we can conclude there for this morning and continue this afternoon. But if you have some questions, then please feel free to ask. Okay. Then enjoy your lunch. Thank you.